Let us begin by considering what we mean by suffering. In the conventional sense, suffering is something we avoid at all costs. We run from pain, we shy away from discomfort, we seek pleasure and ease in every aspect of our lives. And yet, here we are proposing that we should force ourselves to suffer. What madness is this? But you see, the very act of running away from suffering is in itself a form of suffering. It's like trying to escape your own shadow by running faster and faster. The harder you run, the more intensely your shadow pursues you. In the same way, the more desperately we try to avoid suffering, the more pervasive it becomes. Consider for a moment the nature of the universe we inhabit. It is a place of constant change, of birth and death, of creation and destruction. The cosmos itself was born in a great explosion, and it continues to expand and evolve through countless cataclysmic events. Stars are born and die, galaxies collide, black holes devour everything in their path. And yet, from this cosmic dance of destruction and creation, beauty and order emerge. Our own planet Earth, this miraculous blue marble floating in the vastness of space, was forged through eons of volcanic eruptions, meteor impacts, and climatic upheavals. Life itself emerged from this crucible of chaos and has evolved through countless cycles of struggle and adaptation. The very air we breathe is the product of billions of years of photosynthesis, a process that involves the constant destruction and reconstruction. And what are our own bodies? Every breath we take, every beat of our heart, every thought that flits through our mind involves a kind of micro-suffering, a breaking down and building up of cells, a constant dance of death and rebirth. We are, in essence, walking, talking, thinking embodiments of this cosmic process. So, when we speak of forcing ourselves to suffer, we are not advocating for needless self-harm or the pursuit of pain for its own sake. Rather, we are suggesting an alignment with the fundamental nature of existence itself. We are proposing a radical acceptance of the fact that suffering, in its myriad forms, is not an aberration to be avoided, but an integral part of the cosmic dance. But let's delve deeper into this idea. What do we really mean when we say force yourself to suffer? It's not about seeking out physical pain or emotional torment. It's about embracing the challenges, the difficulties, the moments of discomfort that life inevitably brings our way. It's about recognizing that these moments of suffering are not obstacles to our growth and fulfillment, but the very means by which we achieve them. Think about any skill you've ever mastered, any goal you've ever achieved. Did it come easily without effort or struggle? Of course not. Whether it's learning to play an instrument, mastering a sport, building a successful career, or cultivating a deep and meaningful relationship. All worthwhile endeavors involve a degree of suffering. We must push ourselves beyond our comfort zones, face our fears and insecurities, endure failures and setbacks. This suffering is not separate from the achievement. It is an integral part of it. The struggle itself is the achievement, the process of overcoming, of pushing through, persevering in the face of difficulty. This is where true growth and fulfillment lie. Consider the butterfly emerging from its chrysalis. The struggle to break free from its cocoon is not an unfortunate obstacle that the butterfly must overcome before it can fly. The very act of struggling strengthens its wings, preparing it for flight. If we, in our misguided compassion, were to cut open the chrysalis to spare the butterfly its suffering, we would doom it to a life of weakness, unable to fly. In the same way, when we attempt to shield ourselves or others from all forms of suffering, we rob ourselves and them of the opportunity for growth and strength. We become like hothouse flowers, beautiful perhaps, but fragile and ill-equipped to face the realities of life. Now I can almost hear some of you thinking, but Alan, surely there's enough suffering in the world already. Why should we deliberately seek out more? And it's a fair question. Indeed, there is immense suffering in our world. Poverty, disease, war, injustice. But here's the run to this. The suffering comes from our collective attempt to avoid suffering. We wage wars in the name of peace. We exploit others in pursuit of our own comfort. We destroy our environment in our quest for ease and convenience. In our desperate attempts to shield ourselves from discomfort, we create systems and structures that inflict far greater suffering on ourselves and others. What if, instead, we were to embrace a different paradigm? What if we were to recognize that suffering, in its various forms, is not an enemy to be vanquished, but a teacher to be respected? What if we were to willingly engage with the challenges and difficulties that life presents, rather than constantly seeking to avoid them? This is not to say that we should passively accept injustice or unnecessary cruelty, but by changing our relationship with suffering, by seeing it as an integral part of the human experience rather than an aberration to be eliminated at all costs, we open ourselves up to a profound shift in perspective. When we force ourselves to suffer, that is, when we willingly engage with the difficulties and challenges of life, we begin to develop a kind of psychological and emotional musculature. We become more resilient, more adaptable, more capable of facing whatever life throws our way. Think of it like physical exercise. When we lift weights or run long distances, we are, in a very real sense, forcing ourselves to suffer. We push our bodies to their limits, we experience discomfort, even pain. But through this process, we become stronger, healthier, more capable. The suffering involved in the exercise is not separate from the benefits. It is the very means by which those benefits are achieved. In the same way, by forcing ourselves to suffer in other areas of our lives, by tackling difficult problems, by facing our fears, by pushing beyond our comfort zones, we develop our mental, emotional, and spiritual capacities. We become more fully ourselves, more fully alive. But there's an even deeper aspect to this idea of forcing ourselves to suffer. It's not just about developing resilience or achieving personal growth. It's about aligning ourselves with the fundamental nature of reality itself. You see, the universe, in all its vast complexity, doesn't operate on a principle of comfort or ease. It operates on a principle of dynamic tension, of constant change and transformation. The stars burn not because it's comfortable, but because of the immense gravitational forces at their cause. Planets form not through a gentle accumulation of matter, but through violent collisions and intense heat. And life itself, that miraculous emergence of consciousness from the cosmic soup, is a constant process of adaptation and evolution. Every living thing, from the simplest bacterium to the most complex mammal, must constantly struggle to survive, to grow, to reproduce. This struggle is not separate from life. It is life. When we force ourselves to suffer, we are, in a very real sense, participating more fully in this cosmic dance. We are aligning ourselves with the fundamental processes of the universe. We are saying yes to life in all its complexity, all its difficulty, all its pain, and all its joy. But let's be clear about what we mean by forcing ourselves to suffer. We're not talking about self-flagellation or unnecessary asceticism. We're not advocating for a life of constant, grinding misery. Rather, we're suggesting a willingness to engage with the full spectrum of human experience, including those aspects that we might ordinarily shy away from. This could mean pushing yourself to learn a new skill, even when it's frustrating and difficult. It could mean having that difficult conversation you've been avoiding, even though it makes you uncomfortable. It could mean facing your fears head on, whether that's public speaking, heights, or intimacy. It could mean setting ambitious goals for yourself and persevering even when the path becomes challenging. In each of these cases, you are voluntarily embracing a form of suffering. You are choosing to face discomfort, difficulty, even fear. But through this process, you are growing, evolving, becoming more fully yourself. Now, some of you might be thinking, but Alan, isn't this just another form of striving? Aren't we still trying to achieve something? To become something? And it's a perceptive question. Indeed, there's a danger here of forcing yourself into just another self-improvement technique, another way of trying to make ourselves better. When here's the crucial difference. Then we force ourselves to suffer in the way I'm describing. We're not doing it to achieve some future state of perfection or happiness. We're doing it as an expression of our current, complete, perfect nature. We're doing it as a way of more fully inhabiting our lives, more fully expressing our true self. When we fully embrace suffering, when we stop running from it and instead willingly engage with it, it ceases to be suffering in the conventional sense. It becomes simply experience, simply life. The distinction between pleasure and pain, comfort and discomfort, ease and difficulty begins to blur. This is not to say that pain ceases to be painful or that difficulty becomes easy. But our relationship to these experiences changes. We no longer see them as obstacles to be overcome or enemies to be vanquished. Instead, they become teachers, guides, even friends. They become the very means by which we explore the depths of our own being and the nature of reality itself. Consider the experience of a long-distance runner. To an outside observer, the act of running a marathon might appear to be a form of self-imposed suffering. And indeed, it involves physical pain, exhaustion, and mental challenge. But ask any dedicated runner, and they'll tell you that the suffering is not separate from the joy. The pain, the exhaustion, the mental challenges, these are not obstacles to be overcome, but the very essence of the experience. The suffering is the reward. In the same way, then we force ourselves to suffer in other areas of our lives. We begin to discover that the suffering itself contains its own rewards. The difficulty of learning a new skill becomes inseparable from the joy of mastery. The discomfort of facing our fears becomes one with the exhilaration of overcoming them. The pain of emotional vulnerability becomes indistinguishable from the depth of connection it allows. But let's take this idea even further. What if we were to apply this principle not just to our personal challenges and growth, but to our relationship with the world at large? What if we were to force ourselves to suffer by fully engaging with the pain and suffering of others of our planet? In our modern world, it's all too easy to insulate ourselves from the suffering around us. We can change the channel when we see disturbing news. We can scroll past posts about injustice or environmental destruction. We can retreat into our comfortable bubbles of like-minded individuals. But what if, instead, we were to force ourselves to confront these realities head-on? This doesn't mean wallowing in despair or becoming overwhelmed by the world's problems. Rather, it means allowing ourselves to truly feel the pain of others, to be moved by the destruction of our natural world, to be shaken by the injustices in our societies. It means resisting the urge to numb ourselves or turn away. When we force ourselves to suffer in this way, something remarkable happens. We begin to feel more deeply connected to the world around us. We begin to recognize our fundamental interconnectedness with all beings, with the earth itself. And from this place of connection, of shared suffering, true compassion, and meaningful action can arise. This is not about guilt or self-flagellation. It's about opening ourselves up to the full reality of our world, both its beauty and its pain. It's about recognizing that our own well-being is inextricably linked to the well-being of all beings. When we force ourselves to suffer in this way, we begin to transform our relationship with the world. We move from a stance of separation and self-protection to one of engagement and interconnection. We become more fully human, more fully alive. But here's the truly radical idea. What if we were to extend this principle even further? What if we were to force ourselves to suffer by fully embracing the fundamental uncertainty and impermanence of existence itself? You see, at the root of much of our suffering is our desperate attempt to find certainty in an uncertain world, to find permanence in a universe of constant change. We cling to our beliefs, our identities, our possessions, our relationships, trying to create islands of stability in the ever-shifting sea of existence. But what if, instead of resisting this fundamental reality, we were to lean into it? What if we were to force ourselves to suffer by fully embracing the fact that everything is in constant flux, that nothing lasts forever, that we ourselves are not solid, unchanging entities, but rather processes, flows of experience in constant transformation? This is not an easy thing to do. Our minds rebel against it. Our egos fight it tooth and nail. To fully embrace impermanence and uncertainty feels to our conditioned minds like a kind of death, and in a sense it's the death of our illusory sense of a separate, permanent self. When we force ourselves to suffer in this way, when we fully embrace the impermanence and uncertainty of existence, we paradoxically find a kind of freedom and peace that we could never achieve through our attempts at control and certainty. Then we fully accept that everything is changing, that nothing lasts forever. We can begin to truly appreciate the present moment. We can stop grasping at experiences, trying to make them permanent, and instead fully inhabit them as they arise and pass. When we embrace uncertainty, we open ourselves up to the infinite possibilities of each moment. We stop trying to force reality to conform to our expectations and instead become curious about what each new moment might bring. This doesn't mean we become passive or fatalistic. On the contrary, by embracing impermanence and uncertainty, we become more fully engaged with life. We recognize that our actions matter precisely because everything is interconnected and in constant flux. We understand that we have the power to influence the flow of events. Even if we can't. Now I can almost hear some of you thinking, but Alan, isn't this all rather grim? Are you suggesting that life is just suffering, that we should give up on happiness and joy? And I understand this concern. It's the beautiful paradox. We force ourselves to suffer in the way I'm describing. When we fully embrace the challenges, the uncertainties, the impermanence of life, we actually open ourselves up to a deeper, more authentic kind of joy. You see? The joy I'm talking about isn't the fleeting pleasure that comes from getting what we want or avoiding what we don't want. It's not the temporary high of a new purchase or a fleeting experience. It's a profound sense of aliveness of connection, participation in the grand dance of existence. When we force ourselves to suffer by fully engaging with life in all its complexity, we begin to experience a kind of joy that doesn't depend on external circumstances. We find joy in the very act of being alive, in the process of growth and transformation, in our connection to all things. This joy isn't separate from suffering. It arises from our willingness to embrace suffering as part of the totality of experience. It's a joy that can coexist with pain, with difficulty, with uncertainty. It's the joy of full participation in life, of saying yes to everything that arises. Think of it like, yes, imagine you're watching a great drama unfold on stage. The play involves moments of tragedy, of comedy, of suspense, of romance. Now, you could choose to only pay attention during the happy scenes, to close your eyes or leave the theater during the difficult or sad parts. But would that really enhance your experience of the play? Wouldn't you be missing out on the full richness of the story? In the same way, when we try to avoid suffering, when we only seek out pleasure and comfort, we miss out on the full richness of life. We become spectators rather than full participants in the great drama of existence. When we force ourselves to suffer, that is, when we willingly engage with all aspects of life, including the difficult and painful parts, we become full participants. We step onto the stage of life and play our part with full commitment, embracing every scene, every line, every emotion. And here's the truly miraculous thing. When we embrace suffering in this way, we begin to transcend the very distinction between suffering and non-suffering. We begin to see that what we call suffering is simply life expressing itself in all its infinite variety. This doesn't mean that pain ceases to be painful or difficulty becomes easy. But our relationship to these experiences fundamentally shifts. Instead of seeing them as problems to be solved or enemies to be vanquished, we begin to see them as teachers, as opportunities for growth and transformation, as expressions of the incredible complexity and richness of existence. In this light, forcing yourself to suffer becomes an act of profound courage and love. It's a way of saying yes to life in all its manifestations. It's a way of fully inhabiting your humanity, of embracing your role in the cosmic dance. Let me be clear. This is not about being a martyr or a masochist. It's not about seeking out pain or difficulty for its own sake. Rather, it's about developing the courage and the capacity to face whatever arises in your life with openness, curiosity, and engagement. It's about recognizing that every experience, whether we label it as good or bad, is an opportunity for growth, for learning, for deepening our understanding of ourselves and the world around us. When we force ourselves to suffer in this way, we begin to develop a kind of inner strength and resilience that can weather any storm. We become like the flexible reed that bends with the wind rather than the rigid oak that breaks in the storm. We develop the capacity to flow with the ever-changing currents of life rather than constantly fighting against them. But perhaps most importantly, we force ourselves to suffer. When we fully engage with all aspects of life, we open ourselves up to a profound sense of connection and unity with all things. You see, our attempts to avoid suffering are, at their core, attempts to maintain a sense of separation. We try to protect our individual selves from pain, from difficulty, from the harsh realities of the world. But in doing so, we reinforce the illusion of a separate self that stands apart from the rest of existence. When we force ourselves to suffer, on the other hand, we begin to break down this illusion of separation. We recognize that our pain, our struggles, our challenges are not unique to us, but are part of the shared human experience. We begin to feel our fundamental interconnectedness with all beings, with the earth itself, with the entire cosmos. And from this place of connection, of unity, a profound sense of love and compassion naturally arises. Not the sentimental love that depends on getting what we want, but a deeper, more encompassing love that embraces all of existence, including its pain and difficulty. This is the love that allows us to engage fully with the world, to work towards healing and transformation, without becoming overwhelmed or burdened. It's a love that recognizes the pain and suffering in the world not as problems to be solved, but as expressions of the incredible complexity and depth of existence. So, my friends, I invite you to consider this radical idea. Force yourself to suffer, not in a masochistic or self-destructive way, but as an act of courage, of engagement, of love. Force yourself to face your fears, to push beyond your comfort zones, to engage with the difficult realities of our world. Force yourself to embrace uncertainty, impermanence, the fundamental flux of existence. In doing so, you may find that what you once called suffering transforms into something else entirely. You may discover a deeper kind of joy, a more authentic kind of peace, a more encompassing kind of love. You may find yourself participating more fully in the grand dance of existence, playing your unique part in the cosmic drama with full commitment and engagement. Remember, the universe itself was born in a great explosion, in what we might call a moment of cosmic suffering. And from that initial burst of energy and matter, all the beauty and complexity of existence has emerged. In the same way, by embracing our own moments of suffering, we open ourselves up to the possibility of our own explosion of creativity, growth, and transformation. So go forth, my friends, and suffer well. Engage fully with life in all its complexity. Face your challenges with courage and curiosity. Open yourself to the pain of the world with compassion and love. Embrace the fundamental uncertainty and impermanence of existence. For in doing so, you align yourself with the very nature of the cosmos. You participate more fully in the grand dance of creation and destruction, of birth and death, of joy and sorrow that we call life. And in this full participation, you may find a kind of freedom, a kind of peace, a kind of joy that surpasses all understanding. Remember, the path of forcing yourself to suffer is not an easy one. It requires courage, persistence, and a willingness to face discomfort and difficulty, but it is a path that leads to a fuller, richer, more authentic way of being in the world. My dear friends, I leave you with this challenge. Force yourself to suffer, not out of a sense of duty or obligation, but as an act of love, of courage, of full engagement with life. Embrace the difficulties, the challenges, the painful realities of existence. For in doing so, you open yourself up to the full richness and depth of what it means to be alive. And who knows? In forcing yourself to suffer, you may discover that what you once called suffering was simply life itself in all its raw, beautiful, terrible glory. You may find that in embracing suffering, you embrace life itself more fully and completely than you ever thought possible. So, go forth, suffer well, and in your suffering, may you find the deepest joy, the most profound peace, the most encompassing love. For this, my friends, is what it truly means to be alive.